Welcome to the Catch Up with Claire. Today we are catching up with Julie Brown. Julie is a mom of two from Pennsylvania. She is co-owner of Fabric Mart, and she tells me all about it. I was so excited when Julie reached out. Julie was the first person to send me a cold email saying, not sure if this email will go anywhere, but if you're open to having a podcast guest, I'd love to chat with you. And let me tell you, I am so glad that she did. We talk about that email. We talk about being moms. We talk about her fabric store and how she got into it. And of course, being 2026, we talked about the year of the analog hobby and how I feel that Fabric Mart and what she is doing is so conducive to the year that she's about to have. I want to check in with Julie at the end of this year and see all of the classes that she's taught, all of the things people have made with the fabrics they've bought from her. And who knows, maybe I'll actually take a sewing class this year. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Julie as much as I did. Julie, welcome to the Catch Up with Claire.
Hi, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Okay, so I want to give our audience a little bit of how this happened. So I launched this podcast back in the fall, October, November timeframe, released a couple of episodes, and you reached out to me, found my email through Instagram and said, hey, I don't know if you're game for this, but I'd love to have a conversation. And I cannot tell you how excited that made me. That was the goal. That's what I wanted. But I think sometimes you just set these goals. I set these goals that I'm not actually sure are possible. And so when I saw your email and also what we're going to be talking about today, I was so excited. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for reaching out.
Yeah, of course. I honestly, as I was thinking about this, I was like, I just did that. And it's not really me, but, I did it and here we are. So I'm excited.
Okay, I love to hear that because I'm trying to challenge myself to things that I think aren't me, but that I want to be, sort of a like, shoot your shot. What's the worst that could happen? So I love that you did that. And I love that we're now having this conversation.
Yep, sounds about right. How I feel.
Before we get too far into it, so you gave me a little sort of overview of who you are in your email, but I want to hear from you. Can you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. So my name's Julie Brown. Let's see. Do I start with personal or professional?
All of it.
I'm married. We've been married since 2011. We have two kids. They're both boys, 8 years old and 2.5 years old. They are, they're two boys. They're rambunctious. They keep everything very exciting and just, you never know what's going to happen. But my husband and I, like I said, have been married since 2011. So it took a little while for us to decide to have kids. We knew it was something we wanted, but it wasn't something we were, anxious to get started with. We just want to enjoy life. I also am a fabric store owner. I co-own Fabric Mart. We're in Sinking Spring, Pennsylvania, which is about like an hour and a half outside of Philadelphia, about 3 hours from New York City. I've worked there since I was 22 years old in 2008. So you can start doing some math there. I turned 40 this year in like just about 2 weeks. So it'll be a new milestone that I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. Haven't had time to think about it. So
okay, there
is
is so much that I want to dig into in everything you just said. First of all, the time you spent with your husband sort of knowing you wanted to have kids, but delaying because you wanted to just enjoy time together. I want to talk about your boys. I only have one boy, but wow, do I feel like boy energy is such a real thing. An age gap. So 2.5 and 8, 6.5, 6 years so age gap there. I also have not that big, but a 3 and then a 4-year age gap. And I think this is a conversation I hear so many people debating and having and sort of what goes into that. And then all about Fabric Mart. I feel like everyone is labeling 2026 the year of the analog hobby. And in my brain, fabric goes to very conducive to analog hobbies. In high school, we had this, actually this is in middle school, we had this camp and it was at someone's house, like a mom did it and she taught everyone how to sew. Like we all had sewing machine stations and then you'd go pick your fabric and piping and we'd make pillows, we made bulletin boards. And so that's sort of where my brain goes. And then also needle pointing, which I know is different than fabric, but it's the stitching. So I feel like business could be pretty big for you in 2026 with bringing back analog hobbies that way.
Yeah, I noticed that, kind of when the year was changing to 2026 and I was like, oh wow, that word analog is just sort of an odd word for me. But I I was joking to people at work saying, I've been doing this analog hobby for since I was like 8 years old, and I haven't really stopped. We had a really big jump during COVID with
Oh,
people wanting to learn hobbies because they didn't know what else to do. And so the sewing community itself has really grown since COVID. And I think it has continued. And maybe, yes, this year with people talking about it being the trend of the analog hobby, I really hope sewing is one of those things. So, yeah.
I think it will be. Okay, let's table this for a minute and we'll come
Okay.
back. Mom of two boys, waited a couple years. What was that like? And the reason I'm asking is because we
Mhm.
got married rather young. We got married at 24 and then, surprise, got pregnant right away. We also sort of planned to, not right away, it was a year and a half in, but it felt like right away. Had sort of planned of, let's do our time in New York City. I was in graduate school at the time. We were going to finish graduate school, live here, move, settle down, travel, sort of wanted to have that life experience. And then life turned out differently and it's beautiful now. But I'm always curious and I see my friends and girlfriends going through it. What was it like those sort of years pre kids with you and your husband? What were you guys up to?
Yeah. So I think it was a lot like when I really think about it, it was about learning about ourselves and learning
Mhm.
about each other. Even before we got married, we had been together for 7 years before that. I was a freshman in college. He was a year older than me. So we did get to know each other 7 years before getting married. So we've been together like 22 years, which really makes me kind of like, oh my gosh. We chose to wait to live together until we were married. I think it was just learning to get to know each other in a different way. We also had different schedules too. He was working evenings and nights and then weekends where I was working like 9 to 5.
Mhm.
And so that was, I think, a struggle for us at first because, I would come home and be like, why didn't anything get done? You were like available all day. There was a lot of just us figuring each other out and like roles and him learn about me and me learn about him. And I wouldn't trade any of it for having kids earlier. We also did traveling. We've not been ones that have gone like, honestly, I've never been to Europe and I'd love to go to Europe one day. But like when we say traveling, it's more like road trips or like we had but done some cruises. We were traveling. And then I also, for my job, was traveling to fabric shows and I was selling fabric wholesale. So I was going to trade shows, meeting customers. And so I really like once I got married and was kind of out of my parents' house, I really like took the reins, and just traveled to like Austin, Texas, Seattle, Portland, Oregon. I did like this whole like route and I did that for till 2016. In 2016 is when we started trying to have kids and I was like, I can't do this. Like I'm not going to be able to travel and have kids. So I stopped kind of like figured out how can I do this and still have kids. And once I figured out what I wanted to do, basically ended up having to do that for a year before even having kids just to like get an idea of this actually going to work because I had a business partner, I had all these employees, I still wanted to make sure that I could have my family life and then a job and people relying on me because that's like the one thing as a business owner, it's not just like I'm the sole person and there's nobody else working for me. We have 14 people working for us and each of us has a job and if one person's not doing their job, it might filter down to the next person. So, I just have always had to like think about a bigger picture than just myself sometimes. And, that was hard at times, but yeah, like I had to figure it out work wise. My husband and I had to kind of figure out each other. And then when we decided to have kids, it took us about a year for it to actually like conceive. So, that was a little bit of a struggle, but I didn't have to do like infertility treatments, which I'm very grateful for. It was just like time and, time was when
Trying.
it was and that was okay.
Yep. That's a lot. I mean, even just so you were a business owner before having kids, because that
Yeah.
is a very different level of responsibility. Like you have payroll to be responsible for. If there's, a stop in the engine, does the whole operation stop or what part, I guess, can you offset or offload to someone else on your team versus what do you have to put your fingerprints on every time? I would
Yeah.
imagine figuring that out is not an insignificant. You said it took a year or so.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very grateful. I do have a business partner and she is more so like the HR and business
It's like the
like
operations.
financials. Yeah. So I'm very grateful that I have her because we each can step back when we need to an extent. And that was something we had to figure out too. We didn't know we had to work on ourselves. My my business partner and I had to work on ourselves and relationships. And it's kind of like I'm married to her too.
Yeah,
I mean, we spend more time together than I do with my husband during the week,
I'm
when
sure.
it's 9 to 5. So, yeah, lots of relationship building and working on things. And yeah, I'm very grateful to have her, but I also need to like pull my weight and, having the right staff. We've been able to like hone in on having the right staff to fulfill certain things. Like when I couldn't be there, that other people were able to kind of manage that till I got back.
Yep, makes sense. So a lot of work going into deciding get pregnant, working toward getting pregnant, having a baby. You have your first son. What was that like?
Wow, it was really something. It was a little rough, like first child, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. When I was on maternity leave, he was born in November, so I had 3 months that I took off. And, so it was like the holiday season. I really enjoyed that. But, once I started getting back to thinking about that I needed to go back to work, there definitely were thoughts in my head like, do I go back?
Mm.
But in reality, I knew that I needed to, like, like I had a business there. I wasn't necessarily going to walk away, but it was like a thought that came in my head, like, how in the world am I going to be able to do this? And, of course, like talking to my mom had always worked during my life at home. And so I knew like it's possible and how many other women out there work. So, I had to have some pep talks and things. So I think it was just a lot of like emotional support that I needed. But
Oh, it's so emotional. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe if you have a baby and know you're going to be staying home and not working, you don't have these thoughts, but anyone who either has the option to choose to go back or financially has to go back, how do you not have these thoughts? I've had 3 kids now, and every time it's so emotional. Like you go from this being with your baby every single day, supporting their needs, taking care of them. I think postpartum is such a duality of, it's this sort of like soft, comforting time on one side of newborn cuddles and, just quaint, quiet moments cuddling a baby. And then also these very, you know, overstimulating moments of a baby is screaming, crying at you because either they just pooped themselves, they need to be fed, they don't know why they're upset, but they are, and you need to figure out, and you're
Mhm.
bouncing them and rocking them. And so you're going to this sort of like switching, taking care of a newborn to becoming this totally other professional version of yourself when you go back to work, where I just find it to be the adjustment felt so stark of one day I'm in full motherhood mode. And then the very next day, I'm stepping into this professional capacity. And it just felt like a very sharp transition where it would be so nice if we had the space to sort of ease in of, what
Yeah.
is a half day or what is sort of, what does an easing back in even look like? And is that even possible? I don't know, but
Right.
it's something I'd like to dream would be because it's a lot. Like I always know that working is what's best for me. I'm excited about work. I'm excited about the work that I do. And there's nothing that, like, fills my cup more than being able to tune everything out and sit on the floor and play with my kids. Like, not having the stress of work or who's gonna email, who's gonna call, what's happening, not being able to turn that off, like,
Mhm.
detracts from it a little bit. So it's just this balance that you don't really know how thrust into it you're going to be until you experience it. So
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it makes sense weighing and feeling, what is this gonna be like? And do I wanna even go back to this? Because it's a lot to take on.
Right. Yeah. When I first went back to work, I think that I had a week where I went in for half days. And here's the thing: I want to like for all of the viewer or listeners, I just want to know that I do understand that because I'm a business owner. I also have like a certain privilege that I feel like I can sort of make my own rule up, but like within reason. I have a business
Mhm.
partner that also like said, I think 3 months would be the best option if that's something that you're comfortable with. When I first went back after having my first child, I sent him to daycare for a week and I went to work half days and he was at daycare for half days. So just that was like the transition that I thought was the most comfortable for me. I think the biggest the biggest thing that I was worried about though was like going into daycare and how sick they were going to get all the time. because that's a whole
Yes.
other story. But
Yes.
like kind of talking about when you were saying, working and then, sitting on the floor and playing with your kids, that I had to this is honestly more recently that I've had to feel this way, but I have to put my phone in the other room or something like that so that if I know that there's something work related that might pop up, that's not super urgent, of course. I just don't even look at it because I can't have that distraction because I can find that I'm distracted by my phone with when I'm trying to play with the kids and I just want to be more present with them. And honestly, that's been more of a recent thing. It took me 8 years to, I guess, figure that out. But
No, it's so true. And I think it's also though, when it's a newborn, because I noticed a difference of when I was on maternity leave with a baby, a
hmm
newborn is not giving you anything in response. You can
true.
smile at it, cuddle at it, and they're just staring at you I mean, they mostly know that you're mom, but they're not looking for you to sit on the floor and play and, so you can kind of be on the phone and mindless scrolling. And that's
Yes.
actually how I came to start all of this. But it's so true, especially as they get older. You have to realize that you have to put it down for
hmm
it to be so, I do the same thing now. We constantly are resetting ourselves of, we're just gonna go put our phone in the bathroom because we're not even gonna see it in there. We won't be tempted. We live in a small apartment, but, the bathrooms are at the 2 opposite ends of our apartment, so if they're in there, 1, I can put it on the charger, and 2, I'm not gonna hear it, I'm not gonna look at it, I'm gonna have to, actively go
hmm
get it. So I completely understand the, you know what? Just break the addiction.
Oh, yeah.
Put
Yeah.
it down and put it away.
Yeah. And I can relate that when you're breastfeeding or just sitting with a baby. I definitely had that phone on there. I was listening either to podcasts or
Yep.
sewing videos or something that would fill my cup with my sewing is such a big part of me and fabric and everything that I needed just an outlet, whether it was a podcast or a sewing video or just something that was keeping me in that, reminding me of what my hobby was and just keeping my mind going in different way.
I think that's such a healthy reminder, and I do wanna talk about Fabric Mart and how you got there. Before
hmm
we do, I'm going in sequential order here. Had your first son, went
hmm
back to work, did a little bit of a transition in.
hmm
6 years later, is that the right math? You'll tell
Yeah,
me.
technically it was 5.5 because I
5 and a
didn't tell
half.
you their
The half.
months.
Yes. So baby number 2, what was it like? Did you know that you wanted a bigger age gap? Were you trying to get pregnant? What was it deciding if you wanted to have a second one?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely we both knew that we wanted a second one. We didn't know the time frame of what we wanted at first. Originally, we were going to start trying after we moved in. We started getting our old house ready in January, February of 2020, and we all know what
Oh.
happened after that. So, I don't know, I feel like as I'm, talking, I'm realizing how systematic we kind of are in, we plan for one thing, and then we do the next thing, and then we do the next thing. I'm not very good at spontaneity,
Yes, I
and
relate.
I'm realizing that. But anyway, so we had to pause getting our old house ready, and I think it was May of 2020. Then we're like, okay, things are opening back up that we can actually look at houses and put our house on the market and feel that something might actually sell. And we started in May. The old house sold. We didn't have a house to go to yet. We hadn't found one. But long story short, we settled in August of 2020 on the house that we currently live in. And then after we kind of got settled there, okay, I don't really feel like I want to get pregnant right now. It just feels a little scary. So then we waited, I think it was 2022. I was like, okay, I think we're kind of ready. I think I am. I don't know. It feels like we've been out of this a little too long. Do I want to
Mhm.
start all over again? Sleepless nights were super, super hard. I remember feeling with the first one, like a zombie 3/4 of the time. And then I was like, you know what? We just got to do this because if we don't now, I don't want to regret not trying and then regretting it. So we tried. It took a little bit again, but then it happened, and we had him in July of 2023. So yeah, it wasn't fully planned that it was going to be 5.5 years, but I knew it was going to be okay. My brother and I are about 5.5 years apart also. And it's a little bit different dynamic where I'm the older sister and he's the younger brother. So there's sort of a motherly
Mhm.
relationship that I think we have. So, it'll be interesting to see two brothers. I mean, they roughhouse together the same way that I think if the littler one was a little bit older, I think it would be no different.
The exact same, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I feel like so many people and I've started to think about this a lot more now, sort of the effect of motherhood, especially living in New York City versus my expectation of motherhood. I grew up in the Midwest, which is
Mm.
just culturally very different. You know, you get married younger, you have kids right away, you kind of do it. All and like but over a longer span too. And here people wait longer to have their children just because it's so the cost of living is so high.
Sure.
And then you have if you want multiple kids, you kind of have to do it back to back to back. So there's a lot of two under two. And
Hmm.
that's just sort of what I saw and knew. And I had a really hard time with our first and was in no shape to have another baby. And
Yeah.
I was also like, I know that I want our kids to have a sibling, but I don't wanna go through any of this again. So it took a really long time, and then I felt behind because I was doing the math and the pandemic hit, and so we were also like, "Well, I don't wanna have a baby in like, who knows what's going on right now?" It
Hmm.
was very
Hmm.
early. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, now they're gonna be 3 years apart, and now they're gonna be older, and, like, are they gonna like each other?" Which, like, my sister and I are 3 years apart, and we're like best friends. So I don't know why I had that feeling, but I think you just kind of get these things in your head. And what a gift because what they don't talk about, like I can understand both sides of the close together. You're just kind of you're in it and you're banging it all out all at once, kind of the hard sleepless nights and years. But the age gap of when the kids are a little bit more independent and self-sufficient, like my son was eating by himself. He was playing by himself. He was potty trained when we had my daughter
Hmm.
and now our baby is 9 months and he had just turned 6. He had just turned 6 right after she was born, and it was amazing, like, he was making breakfast for my other daughter. So
Oh.
I feel like there's something to the bigger age gap of it's actually kind of nice, and then I also feel like we get to enjoy it longer, like, having a young family still. So I feel like we're enjoying different spectrums of parenthood
Hmm.
because there's different things about each age that you get to connect with them on.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for
Absolutely.
sharing
I
that.
totally like hear you on that. You know, my son, my older son was 5, almost 6 when our little one was born, and I agree. He was able to do, make breakfast for himself if he absolutely needed to, like pour a bowl of cereal
Yep.
or go get yourself some water or like get me something like if I needed, if I was nursing the baby and needed, I don't know, water or a book or like I don't know, something, he was able to do that and I was very grateful and I think as I was getting further away from in age, as the gap was growing, I was like, he will be able to help me. He will be able
Yeah.
to do things. And even to this day, I'm able to say, like, mommy's going to go make dinner. I need you to watch your brother for a moment. And like, you're in charge. But I said, make good choices, and like, I overall do trust him, but I can also read the room when I know that maybe now's not a good time for me to leave the room. Like, if they're really roughhousing, like, now's not the time to actually say, you're in charge.
Yep. We're just starting that. So the baby's 9 months and we're like, "Okay, I'm gonna go do whatever it is.
Yeah.
We'll be right back." And there's sometimes if they're fine and we just sort of like leave the room, I feel like if we announce that we're leaving, they then kind of are like, "Well, maybe now we should pick her up." Like, "No, you weren't picking her up before. Why would you pick her up now that we're leaving?" I just meant make sure she doesn't shove something in her like so
Right.
I feel like sometimes it like cues them off to be more mischievous than they actually would if we were
Uh-huh.
still just sitting there and didn't announce our departure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's
Motherhood.
funny.
Always something. Okay, Julie, let's dive in to all things Fabric Mart. I've heard you say now that you've sort of always had this hobby around sewing, around fabric. Tell me about it.
Okay. Well, I believe it was around when I was 8 years old that I started to sew. My aunt taught me, and then my mom also helped me. After I did like my first project with my aunt, and I was a pair of shorts, and I think I still have them somewhere. I don't fit in them, but I kept them.
I love that.
I want to say that I've sort of self taught myself the rest of the way with some guidance from my mom. And I just always had an interest in it. I enjoyed sewing garments. And then when I got to middle school, I probably stopped, like between 8 and like 12. I probably dabbled in it here and there, but I've always loved crafting or art or, doing things with my hands. And when I went to middle school, I started making handbags for my friends and for myself. And my mom and my dad did craft shows like at the local high school and different places. And I would make a couple bags to try to sell. So I feel like I've always had like a little entrepreneurial part of me there. And
Mhm.
it started quite young, I'd say. And then through high school, I did more bags, and then I dabbled more into quilting. And when I decided when I went to college, I went for art education. I wanted to be an art teacher because it was like the practical thing to do because you probably have a job afterwards.
Yep.
Versus like a fine arts degree, there has to be sort of something different about like what your plan is after that. There are plenty of people out there that do something great with a fine arts degree, and I appreciate and applaud them for that. But like my parents especially were very like practical and saying like, Julie, you really should get that art education if that's what you want to go for, because there's something that will come out of it.
An obvious career path.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Now, when I went to school, I dual majored then with fine arts. So I still kind of got it, the fine arts with the art education, because I've always been just very driven to achieve. And I dual majored, but it was quite easy too because they were similar. So I didn't have to take all that many more classes
Mhm.
to achieve both of them. So then I finished school. Well, I should say when I was in college, when I did the dual major, I was doing like more fine art quilting. You can see behind me for those of you that are watching this. There's a peacock quilt. I did that back in college. I did like art quilts. I did weaving and felting and like different fiber arts. And then when I graduated college, I didn't have a teaching job, actually. I graduated in 2008 when kind of like the market kind of
Mm.
crashed and stuff.
Mhm.
And I didn't really realize it at the time. That's maybe why I didn't have a job, but I don't really know. Had a lot of interviews and I needed a job. Like August and early September came around and I was like, well, nobody hired me for an art teacher. So the local fabric store was hiring in their warehouse and to just pack boxes of fabric and process orders and things. And I thought, okay, like I love fabric, so let's see what happens here. It's just going to be a job. It'll be no problem. So I got the job there at Fabric Mart, and they are like 5 minutes from my parents' house, so that was very convenient. And then after that, I think that they saw like a certain spark and potential in me. The owners are like in their six. Well, now they're like in their 60s. They were kind of like going and thinking about retirement at that point, but not quite ready to. And they saw that potential in me and then decided like to kind of show me the ropes. And I did a lot of what they did to, they trained me basically to take over the business. And then just a smooth transition happened. My business partner came in 2011, actually.
Hmm.
Her dad was one of the business owners. So I also I say this and she knows I say this, but we were sort of in like an arranged marriage. I didn't choose her as my business partner. She was the owner's daughter and we got along. And like I said before, early on, like we had to work on our relationship for sure. But I think it humbled us and made us both grow in good ways. So that was, I think, something really important in my evolution of who I was and who I've become. And yeah, so that's pretty much how I came to be at Fabric Mart. And here I am, co-owner. And yeah,
That's incredible. I feel like, did you know that this was happening while it was happening? So like you said in 2008, you didn't necessarily know that you weren't getting the jobs because of the market factors
yeah.
going on. Did they say, hey, Julie, we want to sort of train and groom you to be, the next owner when we decide to depart? Or did they just sort of start training you and giving you more responsibility piece by piece, and then it came to a point when they were ready to step back, they said that you were sort of an obvious for that role?
Yeah, I think it was talked about for sure. And then, I was given specific things over time. And honestly, I grew a number of things with it too. Like I created some of my own little paths there as well. So I did know what was happening.
What has that been like from, I mean, I hear a lot of, one, always been ambitious, always sort of had high achievement with just how you grew up and double majoring, but also art education and fine arts. You don't hear business background, but you're
Yeah.
very much running a successful business and have been for many years now. How has that sort of on the job training and, shadowing them back when they were on, did it feel because of, I'll say, your hobby, your passion for the creativity and the artistic and the fabric side of it? Did it feel intuitive as you got into it, or did it feel more like a steeper learning curve on the business side?
Yeah, I feel like it was pretty intuitive for most of it. The businessy parts, like financial, HR, like dealing with people, that was probably my hardest thing. And I've definitely grown over the years, especially with like the HR part and like dealing with people having to hire, fire, tell somebody that they're not doing something right or whatever. That's always been really, really hard for me. As I've mentioned before, I'm very, very grateful for my business partner that she is good at that. But we also support each other at this point and, talk about things like that before we would actually implement on it. But the creative part, the selling part was very easy for me. It just came very natural. The creative part of like putting fabrics together, for a collection or something it all came very easy to me. So I'd say part of it was easy. And then the other part was like, I really need help with this. And it isn't why they necessarily brought my business partner on. Like she was also looking for a new avenue. And it was honestly just like a sort of a natural fit. So it really worked out.
It sounds like you guys have done a lot of relationship work to be able to really complement each other's skill sets in that way.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more because I'm thinking a couple of things in my head about the actual business of Fabric Mart. Are you actually a storefront? Like, I'm thinking you can walk into the store and pick out fabrics and like a Hobby Lobby. But then I also heard you talking about wholesale. So then that would be larger companies are buying swaths from you. And I'm thinking, because this is where my brain goes, like bridesmaid dresses when they have fabric for dresses or, furniture. They're buying wholesale from you. But then I also recall from your email, you talked about that you do classes. So there's sort of like a community aspect hands on to that. What are the business streams that you have within Fabric Mart?
Sure. So when I first started there, well, I should say we have a retail store, like a brick and mortar. You can walk in and get fabric, but our main business is our website. It's fabricmartfabrics.com, and that's our main business. And then when I first started, we had a wholesale division, and that's kind of what I took over at first and, would send out samples to customers. The kind of customers that I'm talking about are like independent fabric stores, not like Joann's, which is no more, but like not like corporate. They're like mom and pop fabric stores that specialize in garment fabrics or clothing fabric for clothing. And then we also had small designers that had small batch boutiques, like where they were producing their garments either in-house or like at a small factory and then selling them in their small boutiques. And then also small manufacturers that were just like a little bit larger than the small boutique owners. So we were definitely like a mom and pop or like small business kind of, that's who we were catering to. We weren't catering to like Calvin Klein or like, like the
Right.
bigger names.
Okay.
We were buying fabric from them, actually.
Interesting.
So what we carry are what is called dead stock fabric or closeout fabrics. So that they're kind of a word you can use interchangeably. But dead stock fabric is leftover fabric from the garment industry. Like once, like Calvin Klein, I'm just going to use the as an example, is done making the garments that they've made for that season, they will then have leftover fabric most likely and resell that at a much discounted price.
Hmm.
So, and then we'll buy it at the much discounted price and then resell it to the consumer, like a home sewist or those small businesses that that I was wholesaling to. So I say that we are like the TJ Maxx or the Ollies of fabric.
Okay.
So
Interesting. So how do you decide, do you have a certain like, because I feel like there's a fashion side of this too, kind of what's in, what's the look going to be? How do you decide, like who has the artistic vision behind what you decide to purchase from that?
yeah. So I'm the buyer. So I buy all of the fabric. It definitely, like, I do think about certain trends at times, but sometimes we have to buy like a whole lot and they send me a spreadsheet or samples of like this is what's left over from last season and I have to buy everything, like the beautiful silk charmeuse all the way down to like the acetate lining, which is not like, if you know fabric, like acetate lining is just like like okay, fine. But silk charmeuse is like gorgeous and very high
Mhm.
end. And so we buy like the good with the not so great. And we're not necessarily picking and choosing when we're buying like that. We kind of get what we get and then we have to resell it. Now, there's a job, somebody called a jobber, and that we're a jobber, but we also buy from jobbers. And I come to New York, actually. I was just there this past week. And I go to the garment district and I buy from other jobbers who then I am picking and choosing, what I want. So like when I was there on Tuesday, I picked things that I was thinking were more spring-like, because till they
Sure.
get to our place and we put it on a bolt, process it, take pictures, and put it online, people are going to start thinking about sewing for spring at this point. So
Mhm.
I'm almost having to think just a season ahead, but it's not so bad.
That reminds me of the first time I ever came to New York was I had just finished junior year of high school and was going into my senior year of high school,
Hmm.
and I don't know, this is just how 17-year-old me thought. I was like, "I wanna buy my prom dress in New York," so that I could say I was buying my prom dress in New York. So we went into, like, and I mean, like, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, so we went into, like, every store on Fifth Avenue with complete sticker shock of, like,
Oh
these
no.
gowns were, like, thousands of dollars, and I was like, "Okay." So we ended up going to the garment district in Midtown and picked out fabric and went back home and found a tailor and had them make a dress. I found like some looks online, and then I had to go to the fabric store to actually find the design for them to copy, but it was a very fun process. But what I realized through that though is fabrics that looked beautiful as just a beautiful fabric, it's hard to actually turn it correctly into a garment because of how the pattern is, and
Right.
so we kept, like, and then you don't want the seams to be in the wrong place, and so it was a learning process that, I don't have the eye for that, but it was very fun, and there is some beautiful fabrics down there.
Oh, that's so fun. I love that you shared that. That's really fun.
That is my first and last, creative adventure with
Oh,
trying to create garments.
you never know. Remember, it's the year of analog sewing.
It's
I mean,
true,
analog hobbies.
it's true. I have a lot to learn before I get back there, though. Julie, talk to me about sort of where you are. So I heard you say 8-year-old, you love sort of creating and dabbled in, in garments and quilting and different modalities. Now in your 30s, mom of two, business owner, where are you in the creating and hands-on process now? Do you still have time and space for that? Is it sort of how you escape? Where does that fit in for you now?
It is where I escape, definitely. I don't get as much sewing done as I would like to. I'm in my sewing room right now, and behind me, there's a whole bunch of fabric. And I, come in here and sort of touch it and dream about it and everything. My husband is really great in that he does give me time to, like, he's like, Julie, you go to your sewing room and just go do that. I got the boys. So I'm very, very grateful for him doing that for me. This past year, I've been able to do some of my sewing for my job. You'd think that as a fabric store owner, you would have like all of these projects that you've sewn and everything, but it just doesn't happen. Like when you're running a business, you're doing like the day to day or like,
Right.
other things. It's not like I'm just sewing all the time. But being able to do some of that at work has helped fill my cup since I can't fill it up quite as much here at home. But yeah, I try the best that I can to get in my sewing room, whether it's after the boys are in bed, even if it's just for 30 minutes, I come in and do a little bit. And, every 30 minutes of doing something adds up to having a finished project, in a week or two or a month or even a month or two. I was just off yesterday. I take off, to sew sometimes. It's either I sew or I clean,
Yes.
and when I'm like, you know what? I don't really feel like cleaning. We are sewing today.
Mhm.
So that's what I did yesterday, and I finished a shirt that I started in September. So that's months away that, I did that. So
What's something you can think of that is you're most proud of creating, or was a challenge and took a while and? you wear it or use it proudly?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple coats that I have. It's probably like I don't have a very specific one, I guess, but like I have a nice wool coat or even like a puffer coat. A puffer coat's, I mean, it was actually really easy, but you wouldn't expect like somebody to make a puffer coat, you know?
I would not expect that to be easy at all. I'm thinking that through in my head very rapidly, and I think that would be extremely difficult.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it just is like it had a lot of fun details. It was flannel lined, like I put cotton flannel
Ooh,
on the
yes.
inside. And I don't know, there were just like a lot of details. I love the details and working on that. Like I love the process, but I also love the finished product because that's like something that sewists ask, other sewists. Do you like the process or do you like the end result? And I kind of like both.
Well, I would hope if you are spending time on the process that you like enjoy the end result, but I can also
Right.
understand of things don't always turn out the way that we intend for them as we're going through the process.
No, and they don't, and I have plenty of those. I have plenty of things that didn't work out, and in the moment, especially when you don't have a lot of time to sew, like I do now, when something doesn't turn out, it's like, oh, I feel like I just wasted all of my time and could have like done something else that would have worked out, but
Yep.
it just is what it is.
Yep. I have been wanting window treatments for our living room, and every year I'm like, because I don't know what it is about seeing your Christmas tree in your window where it's like, it looks so beautiful, and my windows are so naked. And so every year at Christmas, I'm like, I either need to get garland to hang up around the window, or I really just want a nice window treatment, like a valance with maybe like one single pretty fabric on either side.
Oh yeah.
And I always say if I had a sewing machine, I would do it, and I don't think I actually would, but I
Well,
it's things that I, like, write off as we live in New York, and I actually probably wouldn't, but I dream about having beautiful window treatments,
you totally should. You totally should. I'll bring my sewing machine one day and I'll teach you.
and I'll look on fabricmart.com and see if I get inspired by some beautiful fabrics.
Exactly.
There we go. Julie, thank you so much for sharing with us. One topic I wanted to come back with before we wrapped up. You mentioned at the
Sure.
beginning you don't know how you feel about it yet, but you are turning 40 this year. I am 33. I feel like, and you're going to tell me how you feel, there's something about being in the mid 30s that feels kind of settled, like comforting, maybe. And I have told people on here before that, like, I love a peek ahead. Like, I love following women who are 5 to 7 years ahead in life because I like to know what's going to happen and sort of what they're going through. And not that I'm going to have that experience, but just sort of, I don't know, what to expect a little bit
Mhm.
because I didn't have that in motherhood, and so now that's, I don't know, a way that I comfort myself. But I see a lot of women in the past year or two who are starting to turn 40 and hearing a similar theme of like, actually, it's not scary and actually it feels good. And I feel more confident than I thought I would. And sort of, I remember when people were turning, like when my parents turned 40 and they had like the headstones from Party City of like over the hill. And I think now, like, that was so mean. Why did we do that? And again, I thought 40 was like 80. And now that I'm 33, I'm like, oh no, like 40 is like tomorrow. But I feel like you get to this stage in your mid 30s where you're not sort of in that young, figuring out life in your 20s. You're a little bit more settled. You know enough to know what you don't know and
Mhm.
what you still have to learn, but you also know enough to have a degree of sort of confidence with where you are, I think.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, I know you said you don't know how you feel about it, and I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here, but where are you with, a big milestone birthday this year?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I should say I'm probably not quite as like worried or scared about it as I thought I would be.
Mhm.
I kind of to piggyback off of what you were saying, there was a coworker that I had that she said that her grandmother told her that when she turned 30 was like her 30s were her best years ever.
Mm.
And because she felt more settled and, knew more about life and I tend to agree that my 30s were really great and like I felt more settled. I didn't really have a lot of time to dwell on certain things that were like the insecurities of my 20s or even my teens,
Mhm.
like not saying that I didn't have insecurities in my 30s because I totally do. I'm hopeful that going into 40 that I have even more wiser words that I can offer people, or just I don't think it's going to be quite as bad as I think. And it's just like an extension of the 30s. Like I'm feeling really great. I'm hoping that I, just continue to feel really good and like you said, more knowledge or feeling more secure.
What are
So
you hoping for? Where are you taking Fabric Mart in your 40s? What are some of the big goals and visions you have?
oh man. I mean, we always aim to grow, and I'm hopeful, like that analog hobby we keep coming back to. I'm hoping
Yep.
that that is something that really is a good thing. We have sewing classes. We didn't really quite talk much about that, but I hope that I can teach some more sewing classes as my boys get a little bit older, and then I have a little bit more freedom to be able to teach some of those classes, but also, just grow more of a sewing community. That's kind of some of my hope.
I
So,
I feel like it is prime time for that. I don't have any time left in my days to even research it, but if something was in my face in my neighborhood being like on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. because it has to be after bedtime or late enough to be
yeah,
bedtime, that for an hour, like walk here and you'll make something beautiful, or it'll be a 3-month class. And by the end of the class, you'll make two beautiful things or whatever. I would be all over that. I feel
sounds
like
perfect.
but I also totally get the oversubscribed mom of two who's a business owner and also wanting time for yourself and, using that extra time to not pour into other people, but give it to yourself and sit in your sewing room and work on your shirt or work on your quilt or work on,
Yeah.
whatever it is that you have in your hands. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand that too.
No, thank you.
Well, Julie, this has truly been such a fun conversation for me. Thank you so much for reaching out back in November. I'm so glad that we were able to make this work out. And thank you for sharing so openly with us.
Yeah, of course. No problem. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Good chatting with you. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Catch Up with Claire. If you did, I would so appreciate if you subscribe, follow, rate, and comment wherever you're listening from. Share it with someone else you think might enjoy listening. This is how I can continue to have these conversations and bring these conversations to you. Until next time, be kind, be brave, and be safe out there.